Got here this 79 Super Reverb, and this model has really high B+. And on the screen node, I measured 495 volts. This is a 500 volt cap I put in here. This cannot remain. It will not be safe. So I'm going to remove that cap. Start with these 3 wires going to this node. This is the screen node if you're playing the home game. Try to do this without disturbing everything else that I did. It's really hard to grab these wires. I want to work fast because if heat works up this inner conductor, that insulation will melt, especially where I grip it. So, all right. Now, I was a really good tech. I was a really good boy in that I bent the leads of the new cap under the eyelets, which means to do this properly, I need to loosen these screws to give myself a little bit of slack. Now, those leads are underneath the eyelet, wrapped, but there's only about 1/8 of an inch beneath them, so I should be able to just brute force them out. Let me get my stronger pliers for this. And this cap was subjected to 495 volts. It's probably still fine for use in something else, but I'll be cautious about that. All right. Notice that the cap body is not wanting to move because it's siliconed to the board. Let me get the bulk of that solder out in each one of those eyelets. I've got a jumper wire on the bottom of the board connecting this ground to the phase inverter node ground. And because that is bent over the top, runs under the bottom and is bent over the top a little bit, it's not going to be disturbed by this. Now, the silicone is there to bear the weight of this cap, but there's not much of it. Just enough to bear the mass, and it comes right off. It sticks to the cap more than the board, so it's pretty much invisible as far as the board goes. That's nice for the future. I'll put this cap to the side, and I'll put a bit of tape on it to indicate this is the one that may not be fit for future service. So I've got a node here with 500 volts, basically 495 when the wall voltage is 120, which means that is going to exceed 500 in a lot of places. So there is no axial 550 or 600 volt cap on the market that will fit. There's a 600 volt that Sprague makes, but it's really huge, and I don't know if it would even fit. So I got 2 of these Vichy 350 volt caps that I'm going to run in series, and each one of these is 47 microfarad. If they're nominally 47 microfarad, that means that they're going to be in series. Each one, it'll be the half the total value, so 23.5 microfarad nominally. That's the same thing as the 22 microfarad that I'm replacing. So I'm trying to bend the leads to make these work here. So let's see. I may need to get a little bit creative on some stuff. What I want to see is if I can do that and have them join. And they just barely not long enough to do it exactly right, but I think it'll probably work. I may need to do a little bit of a bus wire bridge to get it really reliable. Yeah, I need to do a little bit of a bus wire bridge. So let me make something happen, and then we'll resume filming. Okay, so here's a bus wire bridge between them, and the bus wire and the leads are crimped over very tightly. It's more than just a J-hook. I'm going to solder those 2 connections before I put this in place, and then I can control where the wires end up at that point. So let me do that, and then I'll put in here positive at one end, negative at the other end, and a little bit of silicone, and things will begin to make sense. All right, so that's much nicer. So we've got positive, and then the positive comes back to this positive, and then the negative to here. So I've got 2 caps in series with each other. Once this silicone sets up, they'll be really firmly in place without any strain on the leads. So even though I'm not a big fan of connecting wires or crimps or anything, this will be about as good as it gets because there's not going to be any strain on either one of these wires here. And there's no strain on the positive, there's no strain on the negative. Everything's got a gentle curve. But I'm not done because this is trusting the capacitance alone to divide this. So let's say this is 500 volts. One hopes that this cap gets 250 volts, this cap gets 250 volts. That's not the case because this 47 microfarad cap might be 53 microfarad. This 47 microfarad cap might be 42 microfarad. And therefore, they'll draw different amounts of voltage. One cap begins to fail because it has more voltage. It can be a chain reaction down the line. But if we put resistors in place, the resistors will force the voltage balance to be the same. So if I add these 1 watt 220K resistors across each capacitor, that means that we'll be forced to have 250 volts here, 250 volts here. They're 350 volt caps. Neither cap will ever be stressed, and they'll last about the same amount of time as these F&Ts of the more standard Fender values. So I chose these little 1 watt Vichets, the same series as the 2 watts, but physically smaller, and I can just put them here and here. And that's the same thing as physically running them axial. So this will be electronically equivalent with a little less stress and strain, and they're low mass, so this should be pretty much ideal. And I need to move the camera so I have elbow room to attach these, so I'll right back and show you the after. This is just infinitely better. Is this something that I would do in a new build? No, I would design the board differently and either allow for series construction from the get-go like you have on the first node, or I'd do radials or something. But as a workaround for a 1979 ultralinear super reverb, this is about as good as it gets. And I only hope that the next tech in 20 years, whoever she is, understands what I did here and why, and replicates this. Though in 20 years from now, I doubt that there will be any axial caps left. I doubt there'll be that many 5 years from now. So I think that probably the people who service these old Fenders 20 years from now, and the amps will still be around if the tubes are, there'll be commonly sourced filter cap boards for Fenders with that fit in this space that accept radial caps. In which case it'd be very easy to do this as a series node. Anyway, this thing's ready to be buttoned up and played to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Then we'll send it home. This is that 79 Super Reverb where we just changed the screen node filter caps to the handle 600, or actually 700 volts, because they had 495 across them. And let's see how it's sounding. This is the normal channel. No noise on any of the pots, that's good. No DC, because I can do the volume pot on the guitar without having any noise come through. Very good sounding channel. All right, calling that one very healthy. Let's go to the vibrato reverb channel. A little bit of funk there on that pot, it'll work itself out. That's not anything worth going back in for. One of the changes I made to this amp was changing the reverb driver cathode to the AB763 circuit, which puts a lot less strain both on the resistor for that cathode and on the 12AT7 driver. And a lot of the noise that used to be on this amp's reverb is gone now. So that's very healthy. Let's keep that reverb up for a little bit, and we're going to test if there's any noise injected into the reverb from the vibrato. No, that's really good. Sometimes there'll be noise injected into the reverb recovery stage by the adjacent wires in the tremolo, and there is not any here, or as some of my country friends say, tremolo. It's interesting the various pronunciations guitarists use. Tremolo, tremolo, reverb, reverb. I'm not going to play Oxford and say who's right and who's wrong. I'm right. Notice there's no lag as I turn the speed up. On a lot of Fenders, as you increase the speed real fast, it'll just stop for a bit and catch up, and you'll hear it again. That's because it has too large a cathode bypass cap on V5B. Change that to 4.7 or 5 microfarad, and you get a nice tracking of the speed pot. That's the only difference it makes. So yeah, the vibrato's sounding good, the reverb's sounding good, there's no noise on any of the channels. I think this amp's sounding pretty healthy. No DC on this channel either. I declare this amp very healthy, so I cannot get this one to mess up, which is very good. Let me swap this out for the 74 super reverb I have here, which I want to make mess up, but so far have been unable to. All right, here's that 74 that I've almost been unable to make mess up. The owner says has a nasty fizzy sound, particularly when you boost it or use an overdrive pedal. General checkup, and the vibrato seems intermittent. And the vibrato is intermittent, and the reverb is intermittent because the old cable has bad connections at one end. That's pretty typical. They're pretty crappily made to begin with, and replacements cost less than fixing them, and there is no such thing as a perfect one, so it's just one of the things that you live with. Let's see if we can get that raspiness, especially when driven. We may change to some humbuckers or use a pedal. And he says it happens at any volume level. I'm hearing it there. And I think I know what I'm hearing. I think he's got some old Alnico speakers that need to be changed out. So let me grab the the 79 that you were just hearing and put it here and mic it up, and we're going to run the output of this 74, which has Alnico speakers, into that 79, which has got the ceramic, and see if that nastiness goes away. I bet it will. All right, same 74 being run into the speakers of the 79. You might notice that the 79 is physically larger than the 74. They added the mids, like on the Twin. This is essentially a Twin reverb chassis, so the entire cabinet got wider, and they made it just a little bit taller too in the late 70s. I'm hearing two different things. When we were using the Alnico speakers, there was definite cone problems and voice coil rubbing that I was hearing. And that's one layer of yuck. And there's another layer that might just be the way these old tubes behave when pushed. Let me switch to something with humbuckers and see if I can narrow that down a bit. So I think the amp probably needs a little bit of work inside, but the main issue is the speakers. Some weird distortion at the point of clipping can be normal in both of these due to the changes in the phase inverter that happened after 69, though it's harder to make the 79 break up compared to the 74. The 74 is closer to the 60s model, the AB763, but when it transitions into breakup, it's not as pleasing as AB763. These are subjective things, but a lot of people who play these things tend to agree with my subjective opinions, so at least I'm not alone. Let me change guitars. All right, I haven't given Les Paul much love lately, so let me put it for its moment in the sun. Now, this Les Paul is tuned to standard. That Strat was an E flat, so gotta remember to play the same riff, I gotta go down a fret. There's a tearing paper sound there, and I suspect it may either be the underlying amp issue, or we may be exposing problems in these old ceramics. So let me change to yet another speaker cab just to rule that stuff out. All right, so the same settings on the 74 Super Reverb. I'm going into my shop cab. I've got the mic on the ET65, which is what you hear in an awful lot of these videos. Now, this cab is 8 ohms, and the load out from a Super Reverb is 2 ohms. I've got a dummy load in parallel with this, which puts it at 4 ohms. So we've got a 2 ohm to 4 ohm mismatch. That's fine for the Super. We are going to have a little bit of a volume reduction because of the load mismatch, and a slight volume reduction because this is only getting half the power and the dummy load's getting the rest. I'll make up for it on the level on the playback, but let's see how the amp is behaving through these speakers and see if all the problem is gone, in which case both the old 79 ceramics and the old 74 Alnicos are suspect, or if there's a remaining problem in the amp itself. There's a little bit of fuzziness to it, which I associate with this era Fender where they're making some changes to the phase inverter that aren't maybe ideal for a lot of modern playing tastes. You can definitely hear the difference between this 74 and say a 66 when it comes to that kind of stuff. You get into the Bloomfield territory, and I'm up at almost 7 on the gain here, and it gets a little bit fuzzed out. So I will talk to the owner about that and perhaps making some changes to make it a little more AB763-like inside, but he also needs to get those Alnico speakers reconed. And those Alnicos are phenomenal speakers, and there's almost nothing on the market today that sound as good or as made as well as those will be once they're reconed. So it's good news, bad news for the owner. There's very little, if anything, wrong with the amplifier itself. It's just time to give it a new voice.